something might be happening. You have a baby in your leg.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax. HIPAA help is on the way.
All right, welcome to today's podcast, where we are going to get into the private parts of HIPAA. So we're going to look at we're always looking at the privacy rule aspects. The security rule aspects a lot, because I guess they deal with some of the more easier things for people to look at and deal with when it comes to lowering their risks and stuff like that. But we haven't talked about the privacy rule a whole lot, and so you want to dive into some privacy rule guidance, because there's some new guidance that came out recently. So we're going to look at that. But before we get into that, first of all, I want to say hi to Donna. She's on here somewhere, I believe. How's it going, Donna?
I'm hiding in the corner.
I know, ever since the opening,
I know.
Crawled
I thought
into the corner.
that I'd gotten used to the breaches issues. And now we're going to have to get used to this. Wasn't prepared. All of our previous discussions, nothing came out too much on that. It'll be fun. So
it will be.
And this is one, like I said, you need training on some of these crazy deep privacy issues. You don't worry about them as much as I do.
Yeah, we don't. You had mentioned before about being from the country where there wasn't privacy in a previous episode.
Yeah.
We won't go there, but it's funny. So we're going to look at those things, and I'll go ahead and tell the listeners. Of course, I'll remind you again at the end, but we invite you to go to iTunes and rate us. And I know there are those of you who are listening who have not done that yet. I can tell that because the number of downloads far exceeds the number of reviews that we have. So come on, people, man. I mean, we're doing all this content for free. All we ask is that you give us a review. So make sure that happens. If you don't, we will hunt you down. So no threats there. But anyway, so let's get into the show here. So let's look at the privacy rule stuff that's changed and how it affects the businesses and practices out there.
Yeah, the privacy rule itself, it's huge to go delving through. And I personally know enough of it to manage most scenarios, but there's some where I'm like, we're going to need an attorney for that. If you really want to delve into it, here's what I think, but you're going to need an attorney, because these areas are where it gets down to very specific scenarios. Unlike with the security rule, it's like, could this happen? Yes or no? How much do we care about it? Do we think we really have to combat it some way? And then come up with an answer. With the privacy rule, whole new ball game there, because you have to figure out, each individual scenario and say, well, how are we going to address this patient issue? Mm-hmm. So a lot of what you talk about with privacy follows the loop, if you will, of security. You decide how you want to deal with this particular area. You create the internal policies and procedures. You train everybody. You document every single part of your decisions and the activity that relates to it. And then you go back and evaluate again and decide how you want to address it as things progress or new guidance comes out. Mm-hmm. It's the same loop over and over, whether you're talking about privacy, security, or even breach. You need to constantly be in this continuous loop of thinking it through and planning for it. And so around the end of the year and then the first quarter, they OCR and HHS have had a flurry of releases related to privacy and guidance, specific guidance on what you should and shouldn't do, what you can and cannot charge for certain things. And that's why I wanted us to kind of go into it a little bit, because these updates relate to things like determining personal representatives, health programs in the workforce, And the big important one is patient access to medical records. And that's the one that we're really going to focus on, although we'll give you links to see a lot of the new stuff that's come out. The one that I've even gotten questions on, hey, can you do a session on this? These new rules. And I'm like, well, they're there, but I don't know if it's something you would really be able to do a whole session on. So we're going to try to do a session, the two of us, David.
All righty.
So you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready
to learn?
I have my pen and my paper.
Oh, no. Good.
Well, it does go
lie well.
I know I do have my pen and paper.
Okay.
I'm not saying I'm going to take notes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not.
You doodle. You draw pictures.
I doodle.
And send
Exactly.
them to
That's
me.
what I do. But, it is worth saying, though, that because I see this and you probably do too, but there are people out there that say they're doing a HIPAA assessment, or they understand HIPAA and they want to come in and talk to you about it. And really what they're addressing is just the security rule. They're only doing a HIPAA security assessment, and they only know enough about just the security rule to come in and address that. And they're not addressing the privacy rule aspect of it either.
Or they're addressing just the technical safeguards of the security rule.
Exactly.
And not the administrative or the physical, which we see a lot.
Right.
So, yes. And I mean, that's why I made a point of making sure that I went to the Healthcare Compliance Association Compliance Certification Board has a program and a certification that I made a point of getting on privacy compliance. Specifically so, I would be able to go over there and have a solid understanding and regular training that I have to get to maintain my, little letters after my name. But it's not about having the letters after my name in that case, where a lot of people just want to have them there to prove they know stuff. I needed them there to make sure I understood the privacy rule, unlike a lot of technical people. Mm-hmm. And you have others, it's the flip. They don't really understand the security rule. They only understand the privacy rule. So it's another thing that makes me unique.
You are unique.
Yeah, a unique you. So the right to access is a big thing that has been a big push for HHS to say, if we are changing the way that our healthcare system operates, to say that the patient should be involved more and have more responsibility in their care, which, I mean, you think about it, I don't know about you, Dave, my whole life is you go to the doctor when something's wrong or when they tell you have to, you listen to what they tell you, and then you come back when something's wrong or when they have to. So, this concept of taking it and making the patients be more involved is a really good thing.
Mm-hmm.
At least, but until they are, those people that sit on the internet trying to find out what's wrong with them for hours and then go to the doctor with all the reasons they've diagnosed themselves. I'm not advocating that by any means. But
that's what they do. That's what they do to us in reverse, though, for IT people.
Oh, yeah, they do, don't they? I'm sure I have a virus. I have a virus. No, you don't. You have a screwed up Internet Explorer because you shouldn't be using it.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point is they're expanding on the ability to monitor chronic conditions and have the ability for patients to have their own records and be aware of what's in them, track their progress, and eventually have their ability to maintain a personal health record that they can share when they're discussing things with their other providers, which is great because it kind of puts that back onto the patient. But at the same time, that means it puts it on the patient and you have to give it to them when they ask. And they quote they're putting the individuals in the driver's seat with these new specific guidances on letting the individuals have access to their information and defining exactly what you should give them. And there's so many cases that I know I hear about, and it just infuriates me when you're told that you can't get access to such and such record because of HIPAA. I can't give you this. And this is a really good one. And I thought they were joking with me in this when this happened. But apparently, I mean, they swear up and down it's true. I was teaching a class and we were talking about that, how this is just the wrong approach and how it gives HIPAA a bad name in a lot of cases, because HIPAA has so few cases where people use HIPAA as an excuse where it really should have been, But the lady said that she found a stray dog in the neighborhood and took it to the local vet to have it taken, let people check it out and see if they could get it to somebody to adopt it, whatnot. And she calls to see how the dog is and swears up and down. They said they couldn't tell her because of HIPAA.
You got to be kidding me, really?
I know, that's what I said. You're kidding me. And she's like, look, I work in healthcare. I couldn't believe it either, So I she swears up and down it happened. And I could not stop laughing. I thought I couldn't even hardly teach for a minute. I had to just stop and laugh. And I mean, the whole room was like, you're lying. You're like, no, I swear. I mean, how would you make that up?
I saw one the other day on Facebook, and it wasn't near as funny as that, but it was a lady had posted something about one of her relatives going to the hospital, and somebody got on there and started bashing her, saying, you can't do that. You're violating HIPAA. You can't.
There's so many experts now on HIPAA violations. You got the one saying this is Facebook, not reality. Let me violate HIPAA. And then the super experts, you're violating somebody's HIPAA. Oh, God. Anyhow, there are reasonable and appropriate things that should be done. And so these clarifications that they've released, and by the way, we'll put all the links on the website as always, but the clarifications that they've made sure of are addressing some of that craziness that you hear of, well, I can only give you your bill. I can't give you the details, and you don't need to see that. And that's not what we do. And, oh, and by the way, that's going to cost you $60 and we can only do it on paper. It's just all over the place on what people are charging and allowing and not allowing and how long it takes to happen. So I had tried to read through the exciting information that they had released in this new guidance, but it's kind of hard to do. But then at the National HIPAA Summit, we had the panel with Josh, I can't ever say that name.
Jocelyn Samuels.
Yes. And Devin McGraw, who they're kind of like the people in charge of this. So whatever they say, I kind of go with. But I had somebody ask me, can you explain this to me and not just say, because I said so? Give me a little more to it. Okay, well, this is based on them. It's not just because I said so, but I say so too. So first off is stop excluding so much from the patient's right to access. And this was a big debate, and it'll continue to be one. And remember, while we're talking about this is a general rule of what you're supposed to do, and you have to figure out how to apply it to your business properly. It is a business decision that you're making, and you need to remember that you have to have the ability to substantiate your decisions. When you deny access, denying access is the key. If you give it to them, you're not in that much of an issue unless you're charging them out of the way or you're not giving it to them the way they asked. But if you're denying it, there's a whole list of things for excluding information that you have to address. And there's a designated record set, which means here's all the kinds of things we expect to be able to see. And so they've narrowed it down. There are 2 categories of information expressly excluded from the right of access details we're talking about. And that's why I bring it up first, is psychotherapy notes, which are the personal notes of the provider documenting their analysis contents of counseling sessions.
Yeah, you don't want them to read that, I'm sure.
They're maintained separate from the rest of the medical record generally, and that's why they have the notes of what was said, and that can be released to the patient, but you don't necessarily tell them what I thought about it. That is a specific, expressly excluded from the right of access. You don't give that to somebody. Although sometimes I would just love to hear what they said once I was in there. Not because of anything other than really how bad is it? So, and then the other area is information compiled in reasonable, here we go with reasonable again, anticipation of or for use in a civil, criminal, or administrative action or proceeding. So if you're gathering information and documenting things for, say, a malpractice suit, that can be kept separate, but it should be in a separate record. And it gives you a reference to that. But the underlying PHI from the medical or payment records or other records used to generate that stuff should be part of the designated record set and subject to access by the individual. So you have to truly understand in those specific cases where something is different. If you don't do psychotherapy, you really don't have to worry about psychotherapy notes unless you have an element or a case where there's concern and there's separate notes being kept that could fall under that scenario. Like, I don't know why you keep coming in with new reasons that your leg hurts. Something might be happening, you know. You have a baby in your leg. That missing twin is in your leg. That's why it's hurt.
Maybe the doctor is attractive.
I think that's it. I really like you. But, you know, lots of reasons that those kind of things could happen. So that they talk about you really have to tell them all the information. And a lot of people don't want to let them see everything. They want to be able to control it because for, a multitude of reasons apparently. But they're narrowing that down and saying you got to give it to them because they're wanting them to be able to have interoperability capabilities and share the information and take it to other providers so that since we can't seem to get the records going well between the doctors, at least the patient then has control of them. Mm-hmm. And then there's some other specific guidance on personal representatives and all of those things, but I'm not going to drill down into this. We're going to talk about specific allowing me access to my stuff, but they define clearly some on who's an individual's personal representative and how you have to know that if you're dealing with another person. I mean, clearly if there's an individual that's involved in the care, you know, like there's a ton of us in our age group now that are caring for their aging parents and you go with them to the doctor all the time. And, you know, we go in now and we say, look, I need to make sure that you give them the opportunity to sign a HIPAA release, whatever you need for your office. And we do it for every office. And I'm not going to make them sign it. You give them the opportunity to sign it. And, you know, then we go from there. This is a very careful thing that you need to do. So all of that in reason, the details about denial and request. So you don't have to force them to. One of the key things, you can't force people to make the request in writing. So they can make the request any number of ways. They can call you, they can fax, they can email a request, they can go to the portal and fill out a form, all of those things, but you can't force them to do it in writing. It creates unreasonable delays, they say, and, you can let them fill it out. You can say, I would like for you to do it in writing, but you can't say, because you didn't do it in writing, I'm not going to give it to you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes. But you need to document it.
Yeah, you got to document it. That's right. So here's the unreasonable measures. of where they require the individual request access in writing and verification of the requesting the access. Covered entity may not impose unreasonable measures on an individual requesting access, and I like this, that serve as barriers to or unreasonably delay the individual from obtaining access. So basically, they also are saying clearly if somebody makes a request, at most it should be 30 days before you get it to them. But it really shouldn't be a regular 30 days. You should be able to turn it around more frequently or quickly because electronic. That's all they're saying.
Right.
And they say, for example, a doctor may not require, underline, an individual who wants a copy of the records mailed to their home address to physically come to the office to request it and prove it's them before they get it. They can't require them to use a web portal for requesting access because not everybody, believe it or not, can do that or, even wants to. You can't force them to mail an access request because who knows how long that could take, and it gets lost and it's the right form. So you can't force those things to do it. You still want to make sure that you're giving it to the right person and you're not handing it out willy-nilly. They're just saying you can't force these barriers into place. So you have them request it, and they can request it multiple ways. And you do need to make sure it's somebody you should be giving it to. And they can tell you the method that they want it, which takes us to the next thing, which is what they ask for. And you need to provide it in a format that the patient asks for unless your business is physically incapable of doing it, I guess is the word.
So when you say format, though, you're not talking about a PDF or a Word document, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about, is it paper copies or electronic copies in PDFs or a text file or whatever. But generally it's PDFs that you're going to get is a big PDF on a CD or a jump drive or whatever. And you're supposed to, it's not saying that you're required to go out and purchase all of this stuff so that you can do it. But if you have this capability, you can't tell them, no, I'm not going to do it for you. You have to get it in paper.
But I wouldn't take the USB drive they walked in the door with
exactly.
and plug it into your machine.
Which that gets us to another piece that's just in a second about, yes, you have to give it to them in the format they ask. However, you also are supposed to manage your own security while you're at it. So you're not supposed to do it at the detriment of your security or at the detriment of the patient. As long as the patient understands what they're doing and they're making a reasonable request, you should be able to give it to them in a reasonable amount of time in the format that they're asking for, is all they're saying. So when we get to that, then we're talking, first of all, we're talking about electronic medical records. Most of these systems have to have the ability, I'm not saying all of them have to, but most of them have to have the ability that you can request and download to some format the electronic copy of the records and be able to control what you're going to let them have. Boom, boom, boom. And you create that, and they're saying, look, we're all going to electronic. That's the whole push of all, the point of a lot of stuff that we're doing. So we're going to electronic medical records. That would be a key reason that you should be able to give it to them in electronic format because it's already in it.
Mm-hmm.
So they make that very clear. And then they talk about what the patient asked for to be able to give it to them. So just like you talked about, if it presents a risk to my ability to secure our office, that's one thing versus the patient making a request that is not secure, but they're saying, hey, I'm fine with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked a whole room full of practice administrators, compliance officers just recently, if a patient asks for you to send them their medical records to a Gmail account, can you do it? The entire room was very proud to say no.
You burst their bubble. That's
did.
just not fair.
I smashed every one of them. Blah, 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 blah. It was like popping one of them bubble machine thingies. Blah, 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 blah. I love Christmas time when I could step on those. I don't know what's more fun, the ones with the big bubbles or the tiny ones. They all are annoying to parents. And I still do it with the children, which is, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I have the kids doing it. So anyhow, I take after my grandmother who used to start the paper wad fight after we unwrapped Christmas gifts. You should just zing somebody and then look away. But anyway, you can tell she was like my hero. The whole content of your medical record, if I'm asking for the whole freaking thing and I want it sent to me via Gmail, then if you have the capability of doing it, you're supposed to do it. But, and here's the big thing, there's a big but in the room. Baby got back.
Can I lie?
The big but is, and this was an interesting part of the conversation with Samuels and McGraw on stage, because they're like, "Are you saying this is what we're supposed to do?" And the guidance clearly talks about that. And then, of course, the next question is, they say you should tell them that it's not secure and it doesn't meet your security requirements to make sure they understand what they're doing, because we understand the security, that's what we're supposed to be doing, and get clarification with them that they understand it. And then the next question is, well, do you have to have that in writing? Well, we just talked about we can't request all this stuff in writing, number one. Number two is that patients are capable of making those decisions on their own and telling you over the phone. So they say you can just, make sure you tell them on the phone, make sure you tell them in your standard form or on the portal or whatever, if you're requesting this information to go to a Gmail account or unsecured account, that it's open for everybody to get to. And, but they said, if you get the patient to give you verbal approval and you take it, but you don't document it in any way, and then later the patient claims that you didn't do it, we're going to come in and ask you to prove that you did.
So the burden of proof is on the practice.
Oh, they have no choice. That's, so, it's like they said, we can't tell you have to document it a certain way, but we can tell you if anybody ever claims you didn't do it, we're going to ask you to prove it.
So I'm seeing flow charts here.
That's right. So, but we always recommend that everybody, include in their new patient forms and their regular follow-up forms to say, do you want us to communicate? A lot of people already have it. Do you want us to leave a voicemail? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Mm-hmm. And so with that in mind, there's a lot of cases where you can just already have a form and you just add that on there about communicating to you with unsecured email, that you understand it. And if you request it, we're going to give it to you and it's on you.
Right.
So just get it up front and then you're fine. And you can do it if you're on the phone and you mention it to them. Did you sign this? Let me look it up. And you can put it in the notes that you confirmed it again if you're actually talking to them. But that way you have it, documented that you made it clear, and then you don't have to do it every single time. But I thought it was an interesting conversation. It's like, we can't tell you that you have to do this, but we're going to ask you if you did it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. You don't have to document it, but if we need to see documentation, you need to have it.
Yeah. If somebody is going to need to know, then we're going to come back and ask. So, it was a pretty interesting conversation. But, so now we've talked about the requirement to not make it unreasonable, not hamper their ability to get to a request in. And then we've talked about the delay. There can't be a delay, and you have to give it to them in the format that they want. And so that's enough of a clarification of actions that kind of stop some of the craziness. And, a lot of times I think there are a lot of people, let me rephrase this. There are a lot of people that we have heard stories about where they just didn't want to deal with it. So they use HIPAA to cover.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. So they can't do that anymore. Stop that. And if somebody tries to do it, ask them, can you please tell me exactly where in HIPAA it says that? Because that's the best part. Whenever anybody blames HIPAA, ask them can you tell me which policy you're referring to? Which policy do you have that says this?
I had a physical therapist recently say, I really want to abide by HIPAA, but I don't know how to keep all the patients in the back room separated from each other so they don't know. I'm like, you're in a big open room with 20 people. Yeah. I mean, unless you're going to make them wear blinders or something.
Yeah, it's called reasonable and appropriate for your environment.
But yeah, this lady was just freaking out. How am I supposed to do this?
Bless their hearts. Yeah.
Calm down.
Yeah. I'm here for you. Da, 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 da.
Here's my podcast card.
See, listen now. So yeah, I mean, it's a thing where it's like anything else. You can go too far. The people that want to go 50 miles an hour in a 55, because they don't want to break the speed limit, and they want to be sure that when they go down the hill, they wouldn't go over 55. Maybe a little too tight. Although, I know you and I are the people who consider speed limits merely a suggestion.
Oh, boy.
Anyhow, back to the topic at hand. So, yes, we've got all of those things, but here's the big thing that's really created some interesting conundrums, we'll say. There's a word, you used it last week when we were talking, and you said, yeah, I've used another big word for you. So the cost for generating or creating or providing the medical records has been a bit of a free-form kind of thing where they said you can charge for the cost and the labor to create copies of these records. And, in the days when it was mostly paper, that could take a long time. I mean, I've seen some of these charts that are huge. They keep them in 3-ring binders. We're not talking about a little folder when you have chronic conditions and stuff. So, or you've been going to the same physician for a very long time.
So yours would come in volumes, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Depends on which one we're going to. The hand surgery doctor, all of those people going back to 1990, just on the right hand. That'll be good. Oh, wait, no, that's past the thing. It's gone. It's burned up. But anyway, what you can charge someone to do this, they're making it clear. Because again, the whole point is to try to do it electronically, right? Mm-hmm. So they're saying, okay, we get it when you have to make copies of these giant records, but that shouldn't be happening that much anymore. And now you should be able to, download a file and put it on a CD or something and give it to them. Mm-hmm. Which brought me, that's another thing we need to get back to in just a second. But they said clearly you can charge fees, but they should be reasonable. And they're going to start really cracking down on it. Patients complain about some of these fees. And the term they used was, we have found some cases where it was absolutely ridiculous what was being charged. So they weren't clear on exactly what that was, but they did make it clear that you can choose 3 different methods for what the fee you're charging is. So you can do it by the actual cost. You can calculate the actual labor cost to fulfill the request, as long as the labor is only for copying or creating a summary or an explanation. The labor rates used are reasonable for that activity. So don't say you're using the rate that you would use to see a doctor that's a super high specialist for an hour to copy records. And they can add to the labor cost the supply cost. So papers, the CDs, the USB drives, and the postage. Okay, so you can figure out what your actual labor cost is for a reasonable person in the labor force pay to do the action of creating a copy or pulling a summary or an explanation, right? Whatever they're asking for. That's kind of complicated. Not one I would like to do. Then you can do it with an average cost, which is to take all of those same things and say, okay, we're going to calculate what the average is. But note that you cannot, your labor cost for copying, that's okay, but you can't charge labor for search and retrieval. Okay, so just if I got to go make copies of paper, that's one thing. But if all I'm doing is typing a name and searching it in the system, I can't charge for that labor.
Okay.
Following me?
Mm-hmm.
And then for electronic copies, they say you can charge individuals a flat fee for all standard requests for ePHI that you've maintained electronically, provided, and this is the only time I really found where they're very, very specific, provided the fee does not exceed $6.50, inclusive of all labor, supplies, and postage.
Which means charge $6.50.
Exactly. To most people, it's charged for $6. So what they're saying, I mean, come on, I shouldn't be charged $50 for you to type in my name, hit a button, stick in a CD, and let it write some stuff, pull out the CD, put it in a little thing, and mail it to me. And so that's what they're really trying to crack down on. But from a security standpoint, so that's the privacy access thing, but it does cross over to the security rule when we talk about creating these CDs and the USB drives, the little jump drives, whatever anybody calls them. Then you're getting over into the security rule. And I had someone ask me a question when we talked about like the Gmail example of sending it electronically unsecured. And then they're like, well, are we supposed to encrypt it on the USBs and the CDs? Well, it's the exact same answer as the email answer, right?
Right.
I should be able to encrypt it and do it if the patient, tell the patient, I plan on encrypting this on this CD or USB using such and such a method. Here's your, I'll give you your password. But if the patient says, no, I don't want it, and they've confirmed they understand, then you don't have to do it for them. You can't force them to deal with it. So it's the exact same answer no matter what the electronic method is. You need to make sure the patient understands the security requirements, but you can't force it on them. And you can't tell them no because they're not going to get it. On the flip side of that, go to your point. I walk in the door to your practice and I have a USB drive and I say, I would like for you to put my medical records on this. Then you can say, no. And you can tell us why, David.
Because I said so.
There, it's because I said so.
Because it's a violation of our security policy.
That's right. Why, David?
Because they can load viruses onto your systems or all kind of things can go awry.
It's a very scary thing. Do not stick in unknown USB stick. Don't stick a stick in your network anywhere.
Right.
Period. Exclamation point.
As a matter of fact, I'm actually looking at locking down some of our client systems if they want them so that it can't even happen.
Yeah.
If they put a USB stick in there, it won't even allow you to access it. Simply because we may get into this in a near future episode, but there are starting to be more and more cases where employees or ex-employees that are leaving are taking data, and that's the way they're taking it. They're plugging in the USB drives, copying data, going somewhere else with the data. So, that's something we're looking at least giving clients the options of doing.
Yeah, they're using it as a method for exfiltration.
God, there's another big word.
Yeah, but I'm allowed to use them. But they are doing it, and also it's a way for keylogger and all kinds of other things. And so you can have tools that are like endpoint security so that if you plug one in, the first thing it does is scan it. but there's also ways for them to get around it if they really want to, what I'm saying.
And for those who don't know what a keylogger is, you can have a piece of software sitting on the computer and it basically just records every keystroke, which is awesome because then you can take and look at every website the person I went to. I mean, anything they typed in, and then typically if you type in a website, like if you typed in, mybank.com, the very next couple of things, there's usually the username and password.
Right.
So it's not hard to figure out what people are typing in. And plus, if you're typing in patient information, then that's in the keylogger as well.
Yeah, so imagine the person that's in charge of entering demographics off of registration forms, let's say. And you put a keylogger on there. What you going to get? Everything. So no, and that was brought up clearly in the session, and yes, they were like, no, we're not saying. What they did say was, because they're lawyers, what they did say is you should follow your security policies and procedures related to accepting external or third-party devices into your network.
Yeah, which would be don't do it.
Exactly. That's lawyer speak for no. Just like the lawyer speak for, yes, you should document that they know it's not secured. So definitely these areas have to be addressed in every practice. And there are some business associates that are responsible for doing these things as well. That they are managing the practice to the level that they would have to respond to a patient's request for these things. So don't think that it's just a covered entity thing. Your business associate agreement almost always says that you will meet the privacy rule requirements that relate to the job you're doing for us. Mm-hmm. And people always are like, well, that's never me. You better think twice. So, but anyway, I think that's all I have to say about that.
That's all you have to say about that.
Well, we've covered that part, and we'll give you a link to some of these other specific things that they brought up about the wellness programs and what you can and cannot do. There's even one, if you're in an environment where, like a teaching hospital, very interesting environment there where it's a university with a medical center, right? So now I have to deal with FERPA and HIPAA. FERPA.
It even sounds funny.
I know it does. But it relates to the rules about privacy in education records. And so now, if I am a student at the university and I go to the medical center at the university, now my medical records are in with my university student records, and it becomes a whole new ballgame. And so there's guidance on FERPA and HIPAA. There's guidance on the wellness programs. There's guidance on personal representative definitions. So make sure that you take the time to at least evaluate, does your practice or your privacy policies and procedures, do they need to be reevaluated based on these new guidances? But you definitely, every single one that ever would give medical records to a patient for any reason needs to understand this new guidance clearly.
So what you're saying is there has to be workforce training.
Yes. Yes, I am, David. Yes, I am.
Very, very important.
Continual workforce training.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest failure is people. That's your biggest failure point.
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy to see people freaking out about the audits and freaking out about hacking and all that, even though all that can happen. But by far, it's most of the time people doing stupid stuff or not doing things they should be doing that causes the problem.
Well, or they're not being trained.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's typically what it always points back to
is lack of training.
Right. It's a lot of these breaches is simply because somebody's like, I didn't know I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I have legal access to the data. I didn't know I couldn't copy it.
Yeah. I was just trying to get my job done.
Yeah.
I was just trying to help the patient.
Nobody told me I had to encrypt the laptop that got stolen out of the car.
Nobody told me I couldn't just lay it in the car. Nobody told me I couldn't put the encryption key in the bag with the car.
Yeah.
Okay, that one I'm not sure about, though. But
look, I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen laptops with
I see it,
massive amounts of.
They have it, but they're told not to do it. It's whenever you're going to the trouble to encrypt it, you should at least be telling them that. But that's a whole nother topic. It's not for today, David.
Fine, be that way. I'm done with you.
I'm done with you for today.
All right. Well, that's our show for today, folks. Thank you for listening. And hey, don't forget, go to iTunes, review us, please. We need bunches and bunches more reviews on there. That's a way for you to show us your love. So do that. Share us out on social media. For those of you who are doing that, I really appreciate it. We see it. We know it's happening. We appreciate it. It's making a big difference, and we appreciate it. So head on over also to helpmewithhipaa.com if you want to get all the show notes and the links and everything else we talked about in today's podcast. You can get it all there. You could also leave a question there if you want to. We may feature it in a future episode. So that's it for today. And remember, the HIPAA is not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.